Hello, everyone. Thanks for watching this webinar. It's my great pleasure to speak to you about this today. I'm going to indulge and speak to you about my experiences as a medical radiation and imaging technologist and a reflection on the evolution of the profession in Ontario, along with some personal experiences and experiences of other MRITs. My name is Linda Gough, and I am an MRT, as I said, and I'm the Registrar and CEO of the College of Medical Radiation and Imaging Technologists of Ontario. I've been the Registrar for 16 years. I've had about 27 years in regulation. And before that, I was at a major teaching hospital. I had 8 years as a technical director of the diagnostic imaging department and also 10 years in direct clinical practice. So I've been 45 years or more in this profession, and I love it. It's a terrific profession, and I just wanted to thank all my MRIT friends, regulatory and association colleagues across Canada. And as we're going to speak to today, I did a little survey, a little study of my MRIT friends, and we're going to explore the results of that study today. We're going to talk about how the profession has evolved and advanced from its early years as an occupation or a job, where we were called X-ray technicians or X-ray techs. And we're going to look at the impact that technological advancements have had on the growth and the complexity of the profession, and understand how regulation protects the public, but also at the same time advances the practice of the profession. As I started to think about this topic and my experiences in the profession, although we all love the technology, when you think about it, it's really the people. It's the people that make the profession. And so, because of that, what I wanted to do was to go out and ask MRITs what they thought about the profession. And so I did an informal survey of my Facebook friends, and we did this in March, April of last year of 2021. And so this was during COVID time. 94 MRITs were invited to participate, and 76 responded in all 5 specialties. First of all, I was surprised that I had 94 MRIT friends on Facebook. Of course, I have a lot more, but those are my Facebook friends. And so it was a really easy and accessible way to survey my colleagues and find out what they thought about the profession. And so I just had 4 questions for them. What do you enjoy most about working as an MRIT? What was the primary reason that you trained as an MRIT? And what was the secondary reason? And then finally, we asked the question, would you do it all again? Or would you recommend this profession to your friends and family? So we're going to share the findings of my survey throughout this presentation. So the first question, what do you enjoy most about being an MRIT? Number one, by far, the answer is working with patients, helping cancer patients, making a positive difference in a patient's life, in their journey. And so that is absolutely the overriding reason that MRITs enjoy their profession. And we hear that all the time. Number 2 was being part of a team, working with others, working with students. And that teamwork working with colleagues and sharing and developing new projects together. That's, again, a very strong theme for the practice of the profession. Number 3 was intellectual challenge. It's always a variety of patients, procedures, technologies. So it's always interesting. There's always something new happening. And the fourth reason that my friends said that they enjoyed being an MRIT was other opportunities, good employment opportunities, teaching, international travel, management. There's many different areas of your career that you can use your MRIT training in different areas. Some of the comments that people had around this was, I enjoy seeing how happy patients are at the end of their treatment. I love my patients. The best reward is when a patient says thank you with a smile on their face. I think that immediate gratification from your patient is so rewarding. Work is like a new mystery to solve with each patient. And being part of the healthcare team responsible for the diagnosis and the treatment of patients' disease. So, again, focused on the patient. Other comments were included a combination of science, technology, and helping people. That science and technology theme comes through very strongly too. And this particular quote I loved. The deep sense of camaraderie. This relationship, while not always rainbows and sunshine, at its core not only advances the profession and impacts a patient's life, but it also has created profound friendships and many positive changes in my life. And I think many of us would agree with that quote. I know I certainly do. So an MRIT's key identifier is this unique combination of patient care and technology. And of course, the evolution of the profession has been linked to the advancement of the technology. Every procedure, every type, every specialty of medical radiation and imaging technology is based in the technology and the physics and the science. So let's have a look at that. Let's see how long this has been going on. Not that long, just over 120 years ago when Röntgen, who discovered X-rays or invented the first X-ray machines, he mailed out free reprints of his paper announcing the new ray and the potential benefits to mankind. So he did not make any money from his invention. He recognized that the invention had the potential to have huge benefits to mankind. And so he shared his paper, shared his knowledge with the world for free. And then X-ray units started to be built and started to be acquired by the hospitals. And so in the early 1900s, that's where we started to see the early X-ray machines coming into the major hospitals. In 1902, Marie and Pierre Curie successfully isolated radium salts. So then we started treating patients with radium salts very early on at the beginning of the 1900s. And then things kind of stayed very stable until the 1950s when the first cobalt-60 unit was developed. And of course, that had huge impacts in the treatment of cancer using radiation therapy. In 1961, Now we're into the digital modalities and the arrival of computers, and that enabled the development of the first gamma camera or nuclear medicine camera. In 1973, we have the first computer tomography unit in Canada. And of course, that was revolutionary too, because then we were able to see we were able to create 3D images of X-rays and see soft tissue in patients too, as well as bone and air that we had been looking at for the first 70 odd years of the technology. In the late 70s, then the first real-time diagnostic ultrasound scanners were invented and started to be introduced into the diagnostic imaging departments. And in 1982, the very first magnetic resonance imager scanner was installed in Canada. So you can see this huge explosion in technology as computers came into the technology from the 60s onward. So along with the technology, of course, we needed operators of all this exciting new equipment. So early on, for the early X-ray machines, we had X-ray operators, electricians, physicists, engineers, photographers, and then radiographers started to be developed or trained at that point. In the 1950s, the radiographers split into two different types of practice, those who specialized in the diagnostic side and those who specialized in the therapeutic side. So, and that we see all the way through the rest of the profession, this separation into diagnostic and therapeutic. In the 60s, of course, our nuclear medicine technologists evolved to operate the gamma cameras, and they evolved from two types of technologists, the radiological technologist and the medical laboratory technologist, because early on, many of the nuclear medicine procedures were actually done through medical laboratory technology. So again, a merging of technologies and professions. In the 1970s, the real-time ultrasound machines arrived in the radiology departments, and the radiographers learned how to operate those. And I still remember the first one arriving at the hospital for sick children where I was practicing at the time. And our colleagues took it out of its crate and wheeled it back to one of the x-ray rooms that we didn't use very often and just started to do ultrasound. So it has really been an area of huge growth and new technologies and techniques. In the 80s, the first MRI machines arrived, and radiographers and nuclear medicine technologists learned how to operate those. And then in the 90s, we started to see a merging of all these technologies. So we started to have CT and nuclear medicine or SPECT CT, ultrasound, MRI, all these things merging into multimodality units for image-guided therapy and diagnosis. And of course, these are used by all of our specialties of medical radiation and imaging technology. So a very quick history lesson on the evolution of the operators. So training programs also evolved to go along with this and to support these new techniques, these new procedures. Of course, at the beginning, it was all on-the-job training or apprenticeships because this was brand new. There were no training programs. You learned by trial and error, and then started to formalize some of those processes. In the 40s, the hospital-based programs became formalized. And the Canadian Medical Association, this is interesting, the physicians who were relying on the images and the work being performed by the radiographers at the time, they recognized that their work was dependent upon the accuracy of the images that were created and also in medical laboratory technology. This kind of went along together, where the physicians were saying, "Oh, we've got these technologists doing this work. We better make sure that their work is accurate and is to sufficient standard that we can rely on the results of the work they're doing to make an accurate diagnosis for the patient." And so the CMA created its conjoint accreditation program that ensured the quality of the educational programs training the technologists. And so sometimes they were in hospitals, and then they were starting to move into the community colleges in the 1970s. That's when the diploma programs came into effect, with clinical training happening at the teaching hospitals. And then, of course, in the 2000s, we have joint BSc, diploma, and degree completion programs developed in collaboration with universities. So then a Master's of Science was developed, and we're seeing lots more formalized education for the profession now. But really, its base in the 70s was the community colleges with the diploma programs. And now, of course, our new graduates have degrees as well as diplomas. So we need to talk about developing safe practice, of course, as we go along with this, because of ionizing radiation. As you know, X-rays are a dangerous substance, and that became very clear very early on as some of the early operators were losing fingers, getting cataracts, all kinds of terrible radiation-induced injuries because they just didn't know about the terrible effects of X-rays when they are used in high doses, which they were at the time, and also without protection. So we have, and this can actually apply to many different technologies, not just X-rays or radiation. But we have a new technology that's been invented, and it has the potential to image or to treat patients using a form of energy. And so we have early uptake by local advocates, interested healthcare professionals, and clinical experts and MRITs. So those first operators develop their protocols and practices, and they see the benefits, they work, they collaborate with the physicians making the diagnosis or the radiation oncologist doing the treatments, and they develop the protocols and practices to make sure that the patient is treated appropriately, but also the workplace safety pieces happen as well. The technology then starts to expand to other facilities and applications as as the uh, as the benefits are recognized and then become part of the general practice. Then the first operators train other users on the job, and the technology and the clinical applications become more established. The operators then start to become organized, and professional associations are established. And we saw that very early on in the early 1900s. Then professional associations develop voluntary certification exams and standards to support those. And the hospital-based programs evolve into more formal education programs. Instructors develop curricula to ensure graduates are successful on the certification exams. Then employers start to say, I better make sure that my operators are qualified to practice. So they start asking for certification. They start asking for some kind of evidence that the individual they're hiring for a particular role is able to fulfill that role safely. And then later on, if the use of the form of energy poses a risk of harm to the public or workers, the government will restrict the use of the technology. And so we see that, don't we, in the Regulated Health Professions Act that restricts three forms of energy: electricity, ultrasound, and an MRI, or radio frequencies. If the practice of the profession poses a risk of harm to the public, then the government will regulate the profession. So you can see how regulating the profession can be separate and distinct from restricting the use of the technology. So for my informal survey, I asked my colleagues, what was the primary reason that you decided to train as an MRIT, and the secondary reason? So the primary reason, again, was to help people, to work in healthcare, be part of a caring profession, to help cancer patients. These were all very typical responses, and certainly the reason that most of our colleagues went into the profession. Secondly was the intellectual challenge, the opportunity to apply expertise, the variety of the work, being able to see inside the body had appeal to some individuals around the intellectual challenge. An interest in science, of course, an essential component. You need to be strong in physics, technology, and photography. So that's always a great grounding for medical radiation and imaging technology too. It's a good paying career with job security, relatively short training time, and a relatively inexpensive program. And then some people said they had exposure to the work of MRIT. So perhaps they had a family member who was an MRIT, or in healthcare, or they've discovered it at a high school co-op, or they had an X-ray as a child. Something had piqued their interest, and they knew about the work of MRITs. Some of the comments for this particular question is multifaceted. So physics, pharmacy, patient care, education, IT, anatomy, physiology. So people enjoyed applying all these different disciplines to their work. The paradox of using radiation with its potentially lethal effects to advance the cause of fighting a disease such as cancer. And of course, it's all about dose, right? Smaller amounts versus the larger amounts that were used early on in the process. But everything has become so much safer, of course, through the evolution and the advancement of the technology. It's a unique field of study, and the ability to practice internationally, but also to stay at home if you want to stay at home. So lots of different practice settings. It certainly is a global profession. And this person's really geeking out. The science, X-rays are fascinating. I happen to agree, but it really is interesting to see that that was the reason that many of our colleagues went into the profession. Secondary reasons to train: intellectual challenge, rewarding technological advancements. I didn't want to be a nurse or a doctor. I wanted to do something in medical, but not in the traditional role of nurse or doctor. Enjoyed science and technology, good pay, secure career, and opportunities to travel and teach. So those were all secondary reasons my colleagues had listed. And to use my brain every minute of the day and to be well respected. It encompasses being part of the healthcare system, but also has the technology and artistic abilities similar to photography. I love patient care, but I was afraid of becoming too attached to patients, as you would as a nurse. So I kind of enjoyed the transactional nature of the practice. I wanted to help cancer patients. And there's always progression in the field. It's dynamic, always learning, so that keeps it fresh. So here's some of the characteristics of MRITs that I pulled out of the responses. They're caring, intelligent, patient-focused, multitaskers, detail-oriented, definitely have an aptitude for technology and creative, but at the same time, they follow rules and they're supportive, hardworking problem solvers. So, kind of gives you an idea of the type of individual who's attracted to the profession. So let's explore a little bit the evolution of the profession as it relates to the National Association. So we already had a look at how operators or the early professionals started to become organized, and the Canadian Society of Radiological Technicians was established in 1942. And their motto was science and more. And that's their old logo. You can see the X-ray tube there in the middle of the maple leaf. So the National Association started early on with voluntary certification. And in 1945, they had their first examination for a radiological technician. And so that's interesting, right? This is the members of the profession themselves developing a certification exam to make sure that individuals were going to be able to practice competently and safely. In 1956, the first radiation therapy specific courses were offered, and the radiographers split into diagnostic and therapeutic disciplines. And then, of course, as our other specialties came along in nuclear medicine in 1966, that was when their exam and discipline was established at the national level, and in 1996, the MRI exam and discipline was established by CMRITO. Because in 1977, the CSRT became the CAMRT, or the Canadian Association of Medical Radiation Technologists that we know now. And there was a lot of talk at the time to move the terminology from technician to technologist. There was lots of discussion about that. And it was felt that the name change reflected the new diversified role of the technologist's responsibilities. And they also wanted to broaden membership to recognize more than just radiological technology. What was happening in the ultrasound area, the sonographers didn't join the CAMRT because they felt that they were not using radiation. So, and of course they're not, they're using sound waves, but they felt excluded in the name of the CAMRT. And so they started their own organization. And the Canadian Society of Diagnostic Medical Sonographers, or CSDMS, was founded in 1981. And they had another group that actually developed and administered the first certification exams in Canada. And in 2014, both the National Association and the certifying organization merged to form Sonography Canada. So now it's the same kind of model as we have for MRTs. So that's what they do. And the interesting thing is that associations, as you know, get their authority from their members. It's voluntary. And so the profession itself has organized into these associations at the national and also at the provincial level and developed certification exams, supported education, all those things on a voluntary basis. And of course, the last step in the evolution of a profession is regulation of that profession, because you have to have a profession first to regulate. And so, as we know, regulation is a responsibility that's granted to some professions to regulate their own practice. And that's certainly the model we have in Ontario with the Regulated Health Professions Act for health professions. And the authority to regulate is delegated from government. And that's the key issue. It's by way of law or statute. So it's mandatory. It's government that gives us the authority to do that. And so the regulator is given the authority to set entry to practice requirements, to define and enforce standards of practice, and to prescribe programs to ensure continued competence. These are all functions of a regulator. And self-regulation is really a recognition that the profession itself is in the best position to define the requirements for registration and the standards of practice, and that perhaps government is not able to do that. But the deal is that the profession must regulate in the public interest. So not in professional self-interest, it has to be in the public interest. So what is safe practice and making sure that the public is protected. So regulators get their authority from government legislation. It's mandatory. And so there's only so many things that we can do, right? We have to make sure that we have the legal authority to do the things that we are doing. So why would professions seek self-regulation? Starts to get expensive. We have professional associations, and now we also have regulators. Well, it's to protect the public from incompetent or unethical practitioners, to control our own registration requirements, standards, and professional conduct issues, to be part of the recognized healthcare team. And certainly when the RHPA came in 93, that was a key function. And professional recognition and public trust. You're recognized as a profession that is able to regulate itself in the public interest. You have a unique body of knowledge and the maturity to be able to regulate in the public interest. So how does the regulator protect the public? Well, firstly is to allow only individuals who've met the requirements for registration to practice the profession. So only those who are qualified are legally authorized to practice the profession. So registration is the first piece of public protection. And then, of course, we want to make sure that our practitioners are competent to practice throughout their entire careers. And we do that through the quality assurance program, making sure that everybody maintains their continued competence. and the enforcement of standards. So it's important that a regulator has a process to receive complaints from the public when the public has a complaint about the behavior or conduct or competence of a member, and to be able to investigate those members and discipline them um, if they fail to adhere to the standards of practice of the profession or the professional misconduct regulations. So with the RHPA and CMRITO, we have a college and committee composition, of both public and professional members. So this is another way of making sure that the public is protected, is to have public members actually on our council and on our committees and they participate fully in these decisions. So that's a feature that is missing from the professional association board of directors. And it really does, bringing the public and professional members together, keeps the focus on public protection and ensures the accountability and transparency of the work of the college. And this is a photo of our council. The last time we were able to get everybody all together to have their photograph taken, of course, pre-COVID. So this is already a few years old. But unless you know those individuals, you might know some of the professional individuals or the public members. You can't tell the difference between the public members and the professional members. They all work together for the same objective of protecting the public. Transparency and accountability is very important as an organization that's entrusted with protecting the public. And so our website is important to do that. Our council meetings are open to the public. And in fact, we do transmit them or broadcast them through GoToWebinar now. So our website is really our portal into making sure that we are fully transparent to the public and our members. A key document for the self-regulation of the practice of the profession is the standards of practice. And so our standards were created by the college with feedback from medical radiation and imaging technologists and also public consultation. And we have one set of standards for all 5 specialties. And they really set out the minimum level of competence to be able to practice safely. So it describes the expectations for the professional practice of MRITs. And it's the basis for all of our regulatory processes, including registration, professional misconduct, and continued competence. So a very important document. So what's our experience in Ontario around the regulation of MRITs? Well, back in 1967, the Board of Radiological Technicians was established. And this was a piece of legislation that required a register of radiological technicians and radiation therapists. And this register, there was no continued competence requirement. There was no professional conduct processes. There was a registration process, and so you had to have completed an accredited educational program and successfully passed the CAMRT exam, and then you could be entered onto the register of the BRT. In 1993, when the RHPA came into effect, the College of Medical Radiation Technologists of Ontario was established for radiography, radiation therapy, and nuclear medicine technologists. So for the first time, we had a mandatory requirement for nuclear medicine technologists to be registered as well. And of course, we've already talked about the role of CMRTO. It's hard to say that now, CMRTO, to protect the public under the RHPA and the Medical Radiation Technology Act. In 2003, MRI technologists became regulated with CMRTO as the fourth specialty. And in 2011, we were successful in having the MRT Act amended to include a revised scope of practice statement and additional authorized acts that MRTs needed to be able to perform their procedures and take care of their patients. And it really was a reflection of some of that hybrid, some of that merging of the diagnostic and therapeutic and the technology. In 2018, this was our big change. Diagnostic medical sonographers became regulated as a fifth specialty. And of course, in 2020, CMRTO became CMRITO, the College of Medical Radiation and Imaging Technologists, under the new piece of legislation, the Medical Radiation and Imaging Technology Act. So that's been our evolution since the 60s. So what's in a name? Now, this is interesting because MRITs are unique in that their name is linked to the technology, which is always evolving. And there's no international standards. So we're called X-ray technicians, radiographers, radiological technologists, radiotherapists, medical imaging technologists. There's all different kinds of terms used to describe the profession and the specialties within the profession. And in fact, we see people making things up like I'm a CT technologist, I'm a mammographer, and they really do relate very closely to the technology that they're using. But of course, this leads to confusion in the public, patients, other healthcare professionals, even ourselves. But it's very important that we do have a name that everyone can recognize. So the regulation establishes the name in legislation. So that has given us some stability over the years since the RHPA came in, and so that's good. So we're always on the lookout to make sure that people are using their title properly, and that it's used properly in documents and publications, because a nurse is a nurse is a nurse, doctor is a doctor is a doctor. Everybody recognizes those professions, but not medical radiation and imaging technology. And so this is a challenge for us, and one that we continue to take on. Here's our specialty titles for CMRITO members, and as we know, we have 5 specialties. So our MRTR, MRTT, MRTN, MRTMR, and our newest specialty, Diagnostic Medical Sonographer, or DMS. And so you'll see those, and we make sure people are using them properly. So our professional practice is a unique combination of patient care and technology. And I hope that you understand that now and can see how closely our MRITs relate to their equipment, to the technology they're using, but also, of course, to taking care of their patients, because ultimately MRITs have patient care as their main concern. And we heard that loud and clear from our colleagues when I did my little survey. I love my patients is a familiar refrain that we hear. So our survey results, would you do it all again? Or would you recommend the profession to friends and family? And again, remember that this survey was done in 2021. And unfortunately, 7% of the respondents to my little survey said no, primarily because of a lack of recognition and respect, no personal protection equipment. We heard terrible, terrible stories during COVID when MRITs didn't have N95 masks, although they were in the isolation rooms with patients with COVID being intubated alongside the nurses, the doctors, and the radiation and the respiratory therapists who all had N95s, and our members didn't because they weren't on the list. Because again, the government didn't recognize the role of MRITs in patient care. And so this is constant, this reminder to government, to the healthcare system of the role of MRITs, and that every procedure they do is on a patient. And so it's quite different than some of the other technology professions. No pandemic pay, repetitive stress injury, that's very common for people who are performing ultrasounds all day. They get RSIs in their shoulders. Stress from high volumes of patients. Stress from potentially missing a diagnosis or missing imaging something that would affect the patient's diagnosis, burnout, and compassion fatigue. And we're hearing that more and more in the healthcare settings today. But back in 2021, when I asked the question, 93% of my respondents said, yes, I would do it all again. I love working with patients, a very rewarding career, good opportunities. Many of them have supported family and friends to become MRITs as well, and they very much enjoyed being part of the growth of the technology and the evolution of the profession. So a large majority said yes, they would do it all again. Ever-changing technology keeps it interesting, and interacting and supporting patients fills my bucket. Interesting field, high level of interaction with people, teamwork. Absolutely. There's so much more to explore and specialize in. Much more rewarding than I even could have imagined. And I have been blessed to work with so many great peers, hospitals, and clinics. And so, yes, I would do it all again too. And as Registrar and CEO, I am retiring at the end of January of 2023. And I just wanted to thank everyone. There's far too many people to list to thank. I've had amazing colleagues that I've been able to work with, the public members, lawyers, people at the national level, the provincial level, other colleagues in other healthcare professions, all have had such an impact on me and on my career, and of course, all the wonderful staff at CMRITO. Thank you all for everything. And with this, I hope you enjoyed this little reflection and a little teeny tiny trip down memory lane. But thank you all for the privilege and honor of being your registrar for so many years. It has been wonderful. Thank you.